but we will get this started. And as a reminder, if you need to step out at any point in time, this is being live streamed and will be living on our Petoskey Chamber YouTube channel. So I'm Nikki Devitt, president of the Petoskey Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I very much appreciate you all being here today for our little Hot Topics Housing Table Talk, or Chair Talk. We know that housing is a very critical issue to our community and has been for quite some time, and this is going to serve more as an update and kind of letting people know where things stand, showing some light on the horizon, but also showing that there is still a great deal of work to be done. We have a fantastic panel that is going to join us. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to be sure that we recognize our sponsors. And Hot Topics has been around and a part of the Chamber programming for many years now, and it's designed to do community updates on important conversations in a various way. And this time, we're doing it a little differently. It's the first time we've done this kind of town hall style, so I'm kind of excited about it. But always, Comfort Keepers has been a true supporter of our community conversations and our Hot Topics program. And so with us today is Russ Knopp of Comfort Keepers, and I wanted to give Russ the opportunity to say a few words because it's truly important that the Chamber has their support.
Thanks, Nikki. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Russ Knopp, and my wife and I own Comfort Keepers, and we serve Northwest Michigan. For those of you who don't know what Comfort Keepers is we provide solutions to help seniors live in their homes and stay independent. That might be a caregiver, that might be technology, that might be nutrition, whatever the solution needs to be. So that's what we do. But I'm really more excited to be here in person with all you folks doing the Hot Topics, because being a partner with the Petoskey Chamber has been really valuable to us, and to be a partner and bring these topics to the community is really important, and we're proud to be part of that. So thank you very much, Nikki.
Thank you, Russ. I was going to talk into two mics. And thank you to Comfort Keepers. I also want to make sure that we give a special shout out, and I'm hoping Chris is able to get here for our wrap up at the end, to DTE, who graciously stepped forward and said, so you want to live stream? Let us help you do that. So we're grateful for DTE and Chris and their team to really recognize that housing is an issue and stepping in to support the Chamber as they do with many roles. So we're grateful to our sponsors. It's how we can be here today, and so we want to make sure that we recognize them. So now I want to invite up our panelists and get things rolling for this afternoon. We have full intent to have you out of here by 5 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we go quickly and give you as much information as possible, because in the same token, I want to make sure that you have time to ask questions. So if the wonderful panel of ladies will come on up, we will get this started. So with us today, if you read when we started advertising this, we said that we have a panel and a group that's going to have a great conversation with you about people that are truly into the housing field, and these four ladies are absolutely into the housing field. We have Andrea Jacobs, who is our Housing Ready Program Director. We have Yarrow Brown, who is with Housing North. We also have Sarah Ulrich with Habitat for Humanity, and Sarah Ford, don't get confused, with the Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation. So thank you to all of them for joining us today. So I wanted to start it off with, we know that housing is a conversation that we've had for, well over a decade now. And the Petoskey Chamber is frequently one at the front talking about it, as well as all these ladies are as well. So it was interesting because in 2017, the Petoskey Chamber, along with several other organizations and Housing North, formed the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership. And the intent of that was to make sure that the community was informed of policy changes, that we work to strengthen those connections with developers and builders, and really truly finding ways to bridge the financial gaps to allow housing projects to be affordable for our residents and our workforce. A tremendous amount has been accomplished by the Housing Partnership and Housing North since 2017. And a lot of that is all things that happen in the background. So part of today, too, was to show you some of the things that are really in the works right now and kind of talk about what the future looks like for us. So one of the great things that the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership and Housing North are very proud of is hiring Andrea Jacobs. And that effort was funded by the City of Petoskey as well as the City of Harbor Springs. The Resort Township, Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation, the Fry Foundation, Women Who Care, and various individuals. And Andrea has a lovely office at the Emmett County building. So a lot of municipalities worked to help us fund this position specifically for Emmett County. And I could kind of explain what Andrea does, but I think it's more appropriate that Andrea talks a little bit about what her role is, because when you have one person that's dedicated to housing in a county, that is kind of hard to understand in some instances. So tell us.
Hello, friends. Emmett County has 21 districts, and each of those districts has a community of its own, a little bit of sense of identity. So part of the first steps in my job is to get into those communities and talk to them and build relationships with not just the local officials, but community members. And works in my favor. I live up here. I've been up here for a long, long time, so I already know lots of people, but not everybody. But I understand the way that each community has or each area has sort of their own sense of identity, and I can be sensitive to that. Part of being housing ready is talking to those local officials and those community members and saying, what do you want here? We know we need more dwelling units. What does that look like for you? Some areas it's going to be single family subdivision. Some areas it can be more higher density apartments. It depends on the needs and it depends on the wishes of the community. So part of what I try to establish is what that is. And then I have relationships with some different kinds of developers, home builders, apartment complex builders, people that have capacity to do historic renovation, people that have all different skill sets. And I can then try to sort of Rubik's Cube these relationships together and match up a opportunity, a parcel with the community, with the right developer, with the right style of development, and try to make sure that I'm smoothing the way and assisting all along, because a lot of developments or good ideas get some distance into the process and then run into a barrier that absolutely kills it. And to be frank, that has happened more often than not in the past decades. It's very difficult to get things done from just the developer in conversation with the community, because sometimes that relationship can feel adversarial. It's very complicated for the community to try to articulate their wants and needs out into, with the developers or building. So being a person in the middle of that space and being able to work with philanthropic organizations like the Community Foundation and Housing North to have that sense of support and say, okay, here's where we're at. We'd love to get it built. The community's on board. We've done our zoning adjustments. We're ready to go. It's real expensive. We need help. I also have, sort of the ability to have relationships with the entities that can assist in those moments. So I'm in the shadows. Sometimes I'm right out front with a microphone, speaking to the township meetings and the planning commissions and things like that, but also just having conversations with lots and lots of different people to try to find out how we can keep things moving and progressing and nothing just stops. So it's the best job in the whole county.
And to your point, nothing just stops. That's the scary part, because when you've had these conversations for as long as you have, and now we're clearly in a point where crisis is a word that we're using frequently for housing, you have to make sure that things continue to move. From the Chamber's perspective, one of the reasons that housing is a #1 issue for us is because we can tie it directly to the workforce issue. So everywhere you go, you see help wanted signs. Everywhere you go, you hear from employers who don't have enough employees and can't recruit or retain the employees they do have. We know this is the case across the country, across the state, but it is different in Northern Michigan for a variety of reasons, and in Emmett County in particular. We are so far behind on that development and that growth piece in our housing that's exacerbated a problem we've always had. We know staffing gets tight in the summer, But when it's now becoming a year-round crisis issue for our employers, and we as community members feel its effects continuously, so your favorite restaurant's closing early, or that lab work you were going to schedule, now you have to schedule out further. It runs the gamut, and we see it from our smallest businesses to our largest employers in the county. And they all say the same thing. Recruitment and retention is becoming more and more difficult because we cannot find housing for our workforce. And so that is when you kind of hit that complete and total wall and say, okay, this is a crisis, and it has been getting worse and worse, but what does that look like? What do the numbers roll out to be? And for some folks, you've heard this before. You've heard the numbers. You know the statistics. But what's interesting is the statistics that we do have are from 2019, right, Yarrow? 2019, pre-pandemic. So when you see these next numbers, whether it's a refresh to you or for the first time, remember that this was before a pandemic that made housing, workforce, childcare, transportation, everything more difficult and a bigger hurdle. So Andrea, I'm going to let you handle the scary numbers.
Right. The number that we use is about 2,300 units in Emmett County, again, based on 3 years ago data, but we've got to start somewhere. So that's our target. Where does that need come from? And I look at it in three different ways, because I know in northern Michigan, okay, not northern Michigan, but in Emmett County in particular, it's not like we're trying to accommodate for a population boom. We don't need any help attracting people to come up here and visit and enjoy the place. These numbers represent a demand within our own community in first of all, people that are in housing units or dwelling units that don't fit their needs. They're either too big or too small, too close to town, too far away. They need a yard. They need, something that they don't have. But because there's no inventory, there's no movement in that market. So in order for us to create that space and that movement and the ability for people to actually meet the needs for their housing, for their families, for their work, for their transportation, we need to create more units. So there's part of that's one aspect of the demand. The other part, like you said, the businesses and large and small are already struggling to operate at capacity. So this is before we even get to an expansion step. We're just trying to allow and support our community members and our economy to get back up to 100%. The third part of that is the young people that grow up here that we are very proud to educate very, very well, that look around and can't envision settling down in their own hometown. And that's a huge factor for us, not only to create and grow our own workforce, but to be the community with multi-generational longevity, to be that hometown for people that they can look around as a young person and say, yeah, I could get an apartment, or I could get a little house down the road, or I could see spending my life here and building, putting down roots. So those are the three parts of the demand that I like to think of that just exists as it is right now within our community without trying to accommodate for,
The natural
exponential
growth.
Exactly.
The
exactly.
natural growth.
Yeah. What's the next one? Okay, here's these numbers of affordability.
From
Now,
2019.
Okay, fair enough. But affordability means the same thing to all of us. It really does. It means that we have a space that meets our needs, that we can comfortably pay for based on what we make, based on what we earn. But we have to quantify that somehow for our own statistics and calculations. But we try to keep that affordability number for a long, long time has been at 30% of your monthly income. Now in Emmett County, 3 years ago, let's see, more than 30% of renters were spending up to 50% or more of their income on just housing, and 50% of homeowners were at half of their income on housing. Now that was 3 years ago. So you can imagine the pressure that it might be right now. So when we think about affordability, we're looking at the entire income spectrum because we're up against some numbers that are really shocking for building prices and housing and sales prices. So we then take a look at what does this affordability income look like, and if I'm sure each of us has had that moment where we go, gosh, I can't afford any of this, whatever it is that I need, but I make too much on paper to qualify for the scholarship or the assistance. And this is the target market that we're focusing on right now. Not because it isn't difficult for people that make so much less, it's just that there may be some programs that can help. This income range from 80 to 100%, 120% of our area median income, so just middle of the road income, are the people who make too much but can't afford anything. And that goes all the way up to, look at this bottom right number here, $87,000. So if we were using the statistics from the previous slide for a home purchase at 2.6% of your yearly income, that's about $225,000 home. Fair enough. That's a good price for a house. Are there any houses out here for $225,000? No. As a matter of fact, my friend Sarah, just the other day, shared with me that in March of this year, the median sales price in Emmett County was $367,000. That's the middle. So when we talk about affordability, we're talking about everybody. We're talking about our community. We're talking about us. And we're talking about trying to support what we need to maintain our hometown here.
And it's to maintain and develop, and to your point too, who benefits. It's across the range. There is a need for housing for every single person in our community, every single financial sector. There is a need. We know we still have need for those that want the $500, $600, $7,100 home. We know that. And so that inventory spectrum goes across, and there's this shift that happens in communities who start to address the housing numbers as a whole. And what happens is you have movement. So you have somebody who wants to upsize. They're ready. Their income has changed. Their lifestyle's changed. They want to move into the next space. And on the reverse, you have somebody who's, kids are gone, or we're retired, we're ready to kind of downsize. We need a smaller house, or maybe we want to move into an apartment. So when we go back to Andrea's point about that number from 2019 of almost 2,300 was for just what was there, here, need then, not even for that growth and development that we know our communities are looking for. So those numbers, and we've been saying them since obviously 2019, and that tells us that, there's a lot of obstacles in place. And we're going to tell you as we wrap up towards the end how you sitting here today have a voice for that, and how you have a vision for your community, and you can share that and what we can all do together, because it does take everybody sitting in this room and everybody beyond to make change. And we're going to talk a lot about, too, what's at the state level and what's at the local level from legislation and policy. But we want to give you good news first.
Yeah.
Because it isn't all doom and gloom when it comes to housing. There's a lot that has been happening, and Andrea's role particularly, so behind the scenes. A lot of what all of us sit up here and do, Yarrow in particular, and both Sarah's, and your chamber, we're constantly doing stuff behind the scenes that you don't see every day, with the exception of Sarah. We'll talk about that. But there are projects in place, and that's a big thing. And to know that we have that potential for movement. So let's start with a couple of them. I'll throw you a couple, and then we'll let the Sarahs take a couple.
Okay. Keep in mind, things take a long, 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 long time. This is Victory Square, which is a project from the Little Traverse Bay Bands. They are working up by the old Victory Square, where they have the hotel, and there's going to be another hotel, and there's going to be this cool apartment building right in between. So it's going to look all pretty similar in that area, and right smack dab in the middle is going to be some low-income housing. The best part about it, it's fantastic, there's A, it's getting done, and B, that it'll be, for the most part, open to the general public. They're reserving a few units, 8 units.
Only 8.
For tribal members, and the rest of it will be available to the public. So that is huge for the community. And they are making great progress. They have the ability to move forward on some things that we sort of get stuck on sometimes, and they are charging forward. That's fantastic, the work that they're doing at the tribe. So we are very excited about this one. Next one is by the Petoskey High School at the corner of Atkins and McDougal, the old Foster farm, if you know it. Very up north thing to say. This will be 156 units, and it is a range from 1 bedroom all the way up to 3 bedroom and 2 bathroom units for rent. Now this rental range is basically target, sort of exactly in the target that we're looking for, middle of the road, market rate, but not super expensive, just for all of us to be able to have some space to sort of transition in and out of for our appropriate needs. So that's going to be huge. 156 units right by the school. There's going to be sidewalks that walk right to the school. Kids can walk there. There's going to be park and a clubhouse and a dog park and all kinds of cool amenities, trying to make it a real community. So that's a good one. This one, the rental rates are from $900 to $1,600, which is in the target range from the MISHDA and HUD numbers for this last month for this area. So again, not...
And that's if it were built today.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get to, we know
Yeah.
that there's going to be a lot of questions, so we'll make sure we give you opportune time for that one.
Yeah.
Give you the next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pine Pond. This one is super cool. So this one is the Monti family on Pickerel Lake Road, where it was a gravel pit or quarry or something.
So, yeah.
It's not housing now, and they're going to shape it, and they're going to make it, and they're going to fit 128 units over the course of the next 6 years. About between 20 and 24 units a year are going to be coming in and are going to be targeted long-term, year-round workforce housing. These are going to be manufactured. They're going to be manufactured homes. They're very charming. I've seen 3 different models from 1 bedroom all the way up to 3 bedroom. There'll be a range, the Pine Pond, there's a little pond, so there's like a water view. And those will be a little more, expensive and settled in. And then some of the lesser expensive and smaller units will be scattered throughout. So this is very well designed, and the family is again, charging ahead with this project. It's been 2 years in the making, at least, and they are moving forward and shaping dirt right now. So that is close.
That's a close one.
Yeah.
And another one that's, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Ford. We were going to let you guys talk, we promise.
Let Andrea keep talking.
And I particularly wanted the Community Foundation to talk about this, give us a little bit of information on this next project and its statistics, simply because you've been in the news, you've been so involved in it. So this one.
Yes, so the Lofts at Lumber Square, when Andrea said earlier, part of her job is to keep things moving forward so nothing just stops. This is the perfect example of why we got involved with this project. So the Lofts at Lumber Square was proposed by a local developer to build 60 units, and at that time they were applying to the Michigan State Housing Development Authority for low-income housing tax credits. Unfortunately, that project was not successful in garnering those tax credits, and so at that time, the Community Foundation, thanks to our work on the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership, had a relationship with this developer, kind of like the relationships that Andrea is talking about, and we reached out and said, how can we make sure that this project keeps going forward in some form? And so back maybe last June or July, those conversations started, and we've been working in earnest ever since then. For the Community Foundation, what eventually came to be was that the Community Foundation opted to purchase the property. The developer had a purchase agreement on it. Thankfully, the owners were very willing to work with us and have been very patient in working through all of the challenges and changes of the developer going to buy it, now the Community Foundation is going to buy it, because they really wanted to see something like this be built there for the community. And so just a couple weeks ago, on May 19th, the Community Foundation took ownership of that property, and we continue to work with that same developer, Han Development out of Harbor Springs, and are forging forward with a plan to build 60 units of workforce housing development, serving, it would be affordable to households earning up to 120% of their area median income. Andrea showed those slides earlier. And one mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. Right now, so the first phase of that project was to secure the property and just say, okay, we own it, we can figure out what to do with it. And now we are in the process of putting together the plan to actually build it. putting in a state grant application to hopefully attract some state resources, and hopefully, if that is successful, could start building on the project next spring. The long-term vision for this project is that it will be owned and managed by a nonprofit organization. That those details are still being worked out, so I can't speak exactly how that's going to work yet, but that's the vision. The Community Foundation will donate the property to the project, and part of that is that we know that the cost of land can be a barrier. Andrea talked about many of the barriers that exist, and the cost of land is one of those barriers. And so that is our existing financial contribution, along with a significant amount of human capital that we've been putting into this project. So very excited to be working on that. We did that through our Emmett Housing Solutions Fund, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And just a really perfect example, I think, of a project that is going to move forward with the community's support and participation. The land was purchased by us raising money. We had a number of foundations that supported it, and at least 190 individual donations to that project. So that is a true example of the community coming together to make sure that this project move forward. And so, again, a long way to go before those 60 units are actually built, but we're very optimistic and just grateful to be able to be part of a small solution of one need in our community.
And I'll point out too.
Oh, this is
Yep,
located
go
on
ahead.
Emmett Street. So it's actually just kitty corner from our office at the Community Foundation. It's the old Grueller, the current Grueller feed store. Their vacant lot. The Grueller family was the sellers of the property and have been very gracious to work with us on this project.
And to Sarah and Andrea's point, when she talked about the Michigan State Housing Development application, and that MISHDA, as it's called. So one thing that people need to realize, it's very, very difficult in rural northern Michigan to have a MISHDA application succeed for any low-income tax credits. And a lot of that comes back to walkability and many other factors. And so we were extremely successful, and it was a lot of efforts on the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership as well. Advocacy, we go back to advocacy that we'll talk more about, on lobbying the state for the importance of that. And the tribe was very lucky to get that. And it's not very often that you see many, when you can get 70 MISHDA application grants a year and only 3 or 4 happen north of West Branch. That speaks a lot to the hurdles that we have in northern Michigan to get that kind of state funding to target that low income. So now you're going to go to that 60% AMI and lower to kind of go there. And so there are other projects in place and other programs in place. So I want to flip to Habitat, Sarah.
And can I just really quick
Yeah.
clarify? So the project that Nikki's talking about that did get the tax credits is that Victory Square
Right.
project. So that project is being funded through MISHDA and will serve that
Right.
lower income demographic.
So we still get one. So we
Yes.
had 2 going
We
at the
have
same time. It would have
2
been glorious to have
applications,
2
but
at the same
one was funded, and
One
now
was
we have
and
an
one was not.
opportunity to
Yep.
to serve a different target market.
Yeah.
All right.
Floor is yours. We got a lot to talk about for
Finally.
Habitat. Yarrow's being patient.
I'll try to go over these quickly. We've got quite a lot going on, which is exciting.
Start with the first one.
Yeah, I'll start with our Loose Street project. This has been possible through a partnership with the Emmett County Land Bank, who donated the land. Littlefield Township supported property site cleanup, and then the Community Foundation also provided grant support and a 0% interest loan that has helped us to move this project forward. We started by splitting the land into 4 lots. We did a very deep home renovation on a house that was on the property that was built in 1890, so that was a lot of fun. We have added new homes to sites 1, 2, and 4, and these are our new modular units that this was kind of the pilot project for using this new home product. We've been really happy with the quality and the energy efficiency of these homes, and so far our ratings have far exceeded conventional construction methods as far as their efficiency, so it's great. We also design all of our homes to be universally accessible, so that's important for our conversations about aging in place. So 3 of those projects have already been sold. The last project is underway, and we expect to close on that later this summer. And I always like to talk about the people that are purchasing our homes. And so I'll just say that so far our homes have been or will be purchased by a property manager, a dental assistant, a youth mental health counselor, a skilled trades professional, and a hospitality employee. So next we have our Lantern Lane subdivision. This is an 8-acre development. This land was donated by an individual a couple of years ago. It has 8 home sites. 4 are complete. We've got one very well underway, another one that we're breaking ground on, and then we have 2 more that will build by 2024. These homes have been purchased so far by a nurse, a medical assistant, a fitness coach, a hospitality worker, and a factory supervisor. And we are accepting applications on home site number 6. So if you know anybody, please send them our way. Next, we have a project we're working on in East Jordan. We purchased this land through a grant from the Charlevoix County Community Foundation, and this home will be finished later this summer. We're also accepting applications on this home. I always like to talk about our partnership with the Pellston High School Trades Program. It's an awesome, awesome partnership, and so we've been working with the Pellston School now. They build a home for us every year on site. Unfortunately, we weren't able to build a home because COVID kind of got in the way last year, but we will be breaking ground on a new project with the students this summer. And then last,
Big reveal.
a big reveal.
Big
this
reveal.
This is a big one. This is our Meadowlands subdivision. So we purchased 32 lots in Meadowlands subdivision, which was already kind of partially developed, but then dropped back in 2007 was the last time a home was developed on this property. So you'll see on the map, we've got our sites are green, blue, and orange, and that's phase 1, 2, and 3 of this project. This land we were able to purchase with the help of a family foundation. So it's a great project. We've got 10 sites currently underway as part of phase 1. And we'll have those 10 homes on site by the end of this year. We've already got a couple waiting to go onto foundations, so it's awesome. If you get a chance, drive by. It's really fun to check out. This is our biggest housing project that we've built to date. And we'll have a lot of exciting news coming out. This is kind of still in quiet phase, but we'll be sharing more later this summer and have a big celebration and community open house probably in August. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so that's a lot of updates. That's a lot of great projects. And what's exciting when you think about that is if all goes well, and that's 350 units approximately, a little bit more in the next 18 to 24 months. And so back to your numbers about 2019 knowing we needed 2,300 units, there are some people that would say, well, all right, we got a chunk out of it. Doing good. Keep up the great work. The problem is any single one of these projects can be derailed still. There's a couple of them that still are dependent on passing commissions and boards and other instances to get those final approvals to break ground. There's delays, there's lumber costs, there is supply chain issues. All of these things could still be prolonged more than that 18 to 24 months. And also, that's about 10% of what the probable total anticipated need is to meet the current demand, not even the excessive demand that we know is coming. So it is wonderful, but also not time to take your foot off the gas pedal. If anything, it's the incentive we need as a community to look around and say, finally, we've got development on the way, we've got housing on the way, but we're still not done. So what do we do next? And that's kind of one of those things that, again, all that work that goes on in the background that you don't necessarily see, that isn't just local. So we've had some great, amazing progress just in the last 12 months on a county level, on township levels, on city levels in our community of really addressing housing barriers, zoning laws, and issues, and making those changes and recognizing that as a community we need to have those changes in place so that we can be welcoming and we can figure out what that looks like to maybe have a duplex here or a multiplex here. Yeah, that housing ready. Housing ready. And now, you can take her microphone. One of the things too is though it's a state level issue too. So the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance, which the Petoskey Chamber is a partner of, often says one size does not fit all. And we refer to that for just about everything in Northern Michigan because we know that it's different here. And it's often that we're working with our partners that are active in Lansing and in ourselves, trying to make sure that those legislations and policy issues that are in place for a variety of reasons apply to Northern Michigan too. And Housing Michigan Coalition is one that we jumped behind right away, along with Housing North and our sister chambers in Grand Rapids, and for good reason, because there's some fantastic bills that, we'll be honest, are losing momentum, but could have really good impact here in our communities and across the state. So I would love for Yarrow to talk a little bit about what is going on a state level, because it does impact us on a local as well.
Thanks, Nikki. Can you hear me
Gets
okay?
to talk.
So I'm Yarrow Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Housing North. And one of the main reasons we were founded was to do policy and advocacy. We call that one leg of our stool. And so years ago, when Sarah Lucas, who's now the Director of the Office of Rural Development, which we're very excited about, she was our founding Executive Director, and we worked with a group of people that helped found Housing North to really identify our legislative priorities. And as you can imagine, there was a lot. And so when I onboarded in early May 2020, we really needed to find a way to develop a coalition. And so that's kind of how the Housing Michigan Coalition came about. We're one of the founding partners. We're on the executive team. And as you can see on the screen, there's 3 other partners: the Home Builders Association of Michigan, MML, the Michigan Municipal League, and the Grand Rapids Chamber. And Housing Next should be mentioned in there because they're a key part of that as well. So we formed this coalition, and right now there is, I think, over 100 members of the coalition, and there are 4 bills that have passed the Senate. There's a handout back there that describes the 4 bills. Initially, we had 7 bills that we were hoping would make it, but right now we have 4. So they passed the Senate, and they are in the House. I always forget this committee. I did testify on April 27th. So the House Local Government and Municipal Finance Committee heard our 4 bills, and right now we really need those bills to be voted out of committee. So if you want to learn more, you can go on the Housing Michigan Coalition website, and you can reach out to anybody you know. There's 2 counties, I don't have them, in southern Michigan with representatives that we need to really support these bills. We want to have a majority vote. I should also mention that this work we're doing is bicameral and bipartisan. There is no silver bullet to housing, and so these 4 bills, which are one is modeled after the commercial and industrial facilities exemption. So there's, gotta get my other notes out here, but there's a neighborhood enterprise zone bill that is really important. That's a tool that could expand opportunities in Michigan. And the pilot bill, that's one right now. For example, the Lofts of Lumber Square, there's an approved pilot, but they cannot move forward on that pilot because right now it requires state or federal subsidy. So if one of these bills changes, if the pilot bill gets passed, that will allow Lofts of Lumber Square to move forward quicker.
And just for everyone else, a pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes, which is an incentive that you can provide for a developer that, they pay a agreed upon payment instead of the property taxes so that it can make a contribution to the project. So
Thanks, Sarah.
the Lofts of Lumber Square had a pilot approved when it was putting forth the MISHTA application, and that is not something that we can use going forward as it currently stands.
So this would bring it back again,
Yes.
It could put it back in play.
which makes it easier to make the project happen.
Exactly. And just to back up too, like they mentioned, we are not often eligible for low-income housing tax credits, which a PILT or a pilot is a requirement of that program. So these 2 bills would really open up opportunities for our local units of government to make decisions. The other 2 bills involve creating districts or areas that units of government could provide incentives within those districts. I won't go into detail about those, but they're also huge opportunities for our communities. And the work we're doing at Housing North and through our Housing Ready program is to make sure our communities are ready and able to accept these tools and put them to use when they're passed. So I don't know if you wanted me to touch more on that, but just we need your help, both locally, advocacy, and then statewide to get these bills passed. And our hope is that we will be on the floor of the House before they break. For summer break, but that is quite ambitious. So, and if you have any questions, the website is really informative, as well as our website on these bills and ways that you can reach out. So,
And we've got lots of handouts, and we'll talk about those too, and opportunities to ask some questions and dig a little deeper into those bills, because there is some impact there. And business owners, community members, anybody can say, I support these bills because I know that they're going to help my community, and you can kind of read into them a little bit more. And I'm going to keep you on the hot seat too, Yarrow, because what I want to flip to now, and this is where everybody gets to come in. So you know that saying, time, talent, treasure? You've never heard that? You don't say that ever. Yeah, she says it.
We say it a lot in the philanthropy world.
Yeah, I think we all say it. So we're going to kind of, I'm going to let everybody feedback on this one, but because Yarrow was already talking, I want Yarrow to start off with it. because advocacy, and as you said, what Housing North is and why Housing North is here. And Housing North is 10 counties. And keep in mind, that's the overseeing arm of our individual partnership for housing here in Emmett County. So yes, we know that gets confusing, but we do all work together really well. So talk a little bit about some of the advocacy pieces and what's important from a Housing North perspective. And Andrea and Yarrow, you guys kind of cover that piece, and then we'll keep going.
Okay, so advocacy, as I mentioned, is one leg of our stool, as is communications and awareness. So a lot of what we do is provide resources and tools like the Housing Ready checklist and communication toolkits to help our communities become more housing ready. And then the policy and advocacy side is really just that, getting into our communities, supporting Housing Ready program directors to be on the ground in our communities, and working with the local units of government through our housing action team. So the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership is your local housing action group, but every county and many communities have their own. So we are not trying to go in and tell people what to do, but we're hoping to help them meet their housing goals and needs in that community through our Housing Ready work. And I would say the biggest way that you can plug in as advocates in your community is to show up and say, yes, in my backyard. And that's really what we need. So when we're in front, so it's not just Andrea and I on our soapbox saying these are important changes, it's the community saying, yes, we want those changes, and yes, we do want housing in our community.
So being the opposite, I think everybody that's ever heard a housing topic has heard the word NIMBY before. The not in my backyard. We want you to be YIMBYs, yes, in my backyard. So continuing on time, talent, treasure. Andrea, I know you have a lot to say about this because you say it all the time. So I'll let you go a little bit on that treasure piece too, because we've talked about this in our community. We know there's a skill set out there.
Give us all your money.
They're going to ask for the money.
Well, I would like to sort of dovetail on what Yara was talking about in the local units of government. You know, your officials are doing the best that they can to represent the needs of the entire community. But I sit in meeting rooms, 42 nights a month. I'm very good at multiplying myself. And the rooms are empty. And so without any information or input from said community that they are trying to represent and do the best they can for, they're not getting enough information from you. So I get it. It's a nighttime and it's inconvenient and it's, but something as simple as a letter, especially from business owners, employers, community members, something that lets them know where your priorities are, what you are looking for from your planning commission or from a housing perspective, and saying, hey, I think we have great opportunity here. I'd really like to see the council move forward on X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the agenda that night. It can just be a way of communicating with your community members, with your local officials. A letter goes a long way. Showing up goes a long way also. And when we have our moments of a call to action, when something comes on the agenda that we really need some community support for, that matters. But like I said, just that continuous conversation is important.
And when it comes to that, we have two lovely newsletter signups at the back there, one for Housing North and one for the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership that we hope you sign up for, because those call to actions do come out. They do become instances where if you live in Resort Township, if you live in District 7 of Emmett County, if you live in the city limits of Harbor, you'll find that there are things that are going to come up that you might not otherwise know about. And once you're aware, that gives you that opportunity to write that letter or show up to that meeting and say, yes, this matters to my community. I see how it's affecting us all, and I want to be a part of a solution and use my voice. So please, please do that, because it is really important to stay connected. And it's hard. We know our lives are busy, and we know it's very hard for you to stay on top of everything and catch everything. So this is a great way for you to stay in touch and know what's happening in your community from a housing forefront, and the greater 10-county region as a whole. And so treasure standpoint, Andrea, I want you to talk a little bit about what that means when we talk about, or not treasure, talent, what that means when we talk about the fact that everybody has something to contribute. So maybe you don't have the time to go sit in a meeting, and maybe you don't have the funds to contribute to these amazing things we're going to be talking about in just a moment, but everybody has something to give, something to contribute. So if we're looking at it from that ability to become maybe the person who knows how to read a master plan or pays attention and shares that knowledge.
There are not enough of those people.
But there are always places to find a fit. And maybe you're the landscape company. Maybe you're the company who makes, does a great deal with, I almost said one that I probably shouldn't have. I was like, no, don't say that. But maybe you have a skill set. Maybe your business has something that you can contribute to help offset a habitat development, to help with making sure that, hey, this project could go forward, but hey, let's help offset some of these fundings and let's donate some of our time and our resources as a business. And there are organizations that accept those talents that you have as businesses and individuals, for sure. The treasure portion, as Andrea, as we've all said, housing is expensive. We know
So
this.
expensive. So very expensive.
And just getting more so. And so that doesn't change the fact that it still needs to be done. And we still need to continue this wonderful progress we have. So we have two incredible things in our community. And I don't think I can ever speak highly enough about our community foundation and our Habitat for what they're doing to actually make change. And so we talked about lofts at Lumber Square. The community foundation purchasing property for housing is not a normal thing to do, is it?
No, not at all.
No.
We don't even own our own office building, so.
Thank you. So let's talk about this Housing Solutions Fund that I hold up to the rest of the state and say, do you see how amazing this is? We have this.
And we appreciate that. Nikki is our biggest champion, I think. So thank you, Nikki. Like I said earlier, the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund was really born out of this realization from our work with the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership that one of the biggest barriers to creating new housing in our community is that there is almost always a significant financial gap. It costs more to build even a single unit of housing than what our local workforce can afford in order to maintain affordability within those ratios that we talked about. And so we did some research, we looked around, we said, okay, what can be done to address that affordability, that financial gap that exists? So we created the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund, and at the time, we did a lot of research and discovered that there isn't a lot of funding available for that kind of early stage of development. You can get loans, you can get things down the road when you have a construction project or when you have a little bit more details, but those early stages is where the funding gap really is difficult to find. And so that could be just the cost of acquiring land, like we just did for the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund. Just buying the property can be a barrier. It could be when you buy that property, you need to do some environmental studies, and that costs money. And those can be things that are going to be that a developer would have to invest their money in, not knowing whether or not they're ever going to get that back down the road. In the example of Habitat, it was really a situation where Habitat, it was beneficial for them to get some money up front, and then when they sold the home, they were able to repay it to us right away. So it was like a very short, like 6-month loan, 0% interest, and so we were able to do that. That actually wasn't through the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund, but we also did another grant to them that was for infrastructure. So they had some wells that needed to be done and some other things on a couple of the other sites. And so we gave a grant in that instance to the project that helped reduce the cost of that needed infrastructure. And so these are all things that could be barriers to development that the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund is set up to support. And we do that through grants, like I just talked about, to nonprofit organizations like Habitat or others that exist. We could also support local municipalities if any of our local governments wanted to get involved in a housing effort. We can also provide low-cost patient capital to for-profit developers too. So in those instances, we're not able to give a grant to the project, but we could lend the money, and then later when the cash flow happens for the project, they could pay it back. So those are ways that the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund can support a project. And for the lofts at Lumber Square, we used the Emmett Housing Solutions Fund to fundraise the money that we needed to purchase that property. And that's where I talked earlier about the number of various donors that supported that project. And so as we look forward, we want to do more in this space. The Community Foundations Board has been very, very supportive of our continued efforts around housing, and we would love to be able to say yes to every project that meets the criteria. And the criteria I have are up here. We're focused on those projects that serve between 80 and 120% of the area median income. We really are looking at projects that are going to be able to leverage other resources. So at the example of the lofts at Lumber Square, we're looking at leveraging state resources. We're looking at working with the city and local government on some funding incentives and things like that. And we also want to be smart about development, right? Andrea talked about where projects make sense for what the community needs. So we know in some instances that means a denser development, walkable, where 60 units to the downtown community is an appropriate place. That might not be a 60-unit apartment complex, might not be appropriate in every area. So we also want to think about transportation and walkability and people being able to get to where they need to go. Where are the jobs and services located? There's a lot of arguments that are made that, well, we have land that's affordable. Well, then you run into transportation issues. You run into families having to commute. You run into infrastructure. You can't create multifamily housing without that infrastructure development. So those are all things that we're considering when we're looking at which projects we'll support with this fund. So going forward, we hope to grow this fund and be able to do a lot more projects going forward. And that's one way that if you have treasure that Nikki spoke of, then you are interested in, maybe you can't do something else, but giving financially is a way that you support something. That's a way to help us.
Absolutely. And one of the things too, and Habitat speaks to this well with a lot of the places that you look at, and as you said, placement of these developments that's why we love the fact that we have these two great organizations that will be happily there to take financial donations to further the community's housing developments, because it is hard in northern Michigan to build, because in case you haven't noticed, we're kind of rural. And so infrastructure is a big hurdle a lot of times. So that's water, sewer, broadband, we all know. That makes housing development costs extremely different than some other regions in the state when we look at that as an overall. So I love what Habitat's doing, and you teased about this. So now tell us about this.
So we're really excited to share, and this will again be more in the public phase later this summer, our Foundations for Our Future campaign. So I talked about all the great houses we are planning to build or are currently building, and now we need to pay for them. So our campaign, we have a goal to raise $5 million in startup capital to build a total of over $12 million in homes. And so the reason that we're looking at that $5 million number is because as we build the homes, we then sell them to our program partners. So some of those funds come back, and so we can kind of continue to roll those dollars into future project development years. And we can go to the next slide, and I'll just continue to kind of piggyback on what everybody else is saying and share some different ways that everybody can get involved in housing. Of course, we would love financial contributions to our campaign. Later this summer, we have one of our beloved local businesses is going to be challenging the community through a match grant. So you'll be hearing more about that later this summer. Let's see, what else do I have up on my slide here? Donations of labor and materials are really important. That helps us to keep our costs down and to be more efficient at our sites. Donated land. So that was one thing I kept kind of bringing up when I was sharing about the different projects we're working on, because that has been the driving force for many of our projects, is having that land cost taken away from the overall cost of the project, as Sarah talked about as well. And Habitat too will take vacant parcels, or if you have an old commercial building that has maybe a glimmer of hope to be turned into housing, we love to look at those too, or houses built in 1890 that are really needing a lot of love.
Did you love it though? Did you love that house?
I will say yes on record. We loved it, yes. Another thing people don't think about is we have a restore that helps to generate funds for our programs as well. So if you own a business and you have overstock items or mildly scratched and dented things that you need a place to send them to, please give us a call and we'll happily take those donations. We also consider payroll deductions as an opportunity to get your employees involved in fundraising for some of these projects, host an event at your business. Another good one that I would really like to get the word out about is offering a down payment assistance program to your staff. this would be so huge if everyone chipped in and worked that out through your companies, because if you can help people overcome some of these financial barriers to purchasing a home, that would benefit them, and it would also benefit us because it takes some of the stress off of us financially when we have additional outside sources for support. What else do I have up on there? It's awkward when you're not looking at your screen.
You can look. Go ahead.
And then, yeah, just be an advocate like everybody's been talking about, and share that housing is important and find ways to get involved.
Awesome. Okay, so that's a lot, and we covered a lot really quickly because we wanted to give you the opportunity to talk. So we talk about the fact that we know housing development is economic development. We know that it's a workforce challenge. We know the numbers that we've all seen, and we know that the opportunities to really... She's just done. Oh, is that you? Oh my gosh, really? Oh, I'm going to hold that over her head for a while. Does that mean our time's up, Andrea? Oh, okay, good. Good to know. So we'll now give you some opportunities. So we know there's progress. We know there's movement. We know there's projects. We actually have a meeting tonight on one of those projects in Bear Creek Township. And there will be many of us going to advocate and continue to make sure that this project, the Borland project, the one out on Atkins and McDougall, continues to move forward because we know how important it is. So we know that you can see all of these great projects. There's opportunity. We know that you see your need that we're asking of you, your time, your talent, your treasure. And we could keep going for hours, but we want to give you an opportunity too to see if you have any questions at all. And because we, know who to use in the audience, we're going to...
we have a plant.
We have a plant. Carlin Smith, who many of you, of course, know, with Consumers Energy, also serves on the board of directors as a president for Housing North. And so he's going to be your mic man. So please raise your hand. We're all friends here. And ask some questions, and let's see if this panel can help you.
All right. I'll be right with you, Heidi. First, I just want to follow up on Nikki's point. The Bear Creek Township Commission Board is meeting tonight, and the Alexander project, the 156 unit on the Foster Farm, is up for consideration tonight for a final site plan approval. The planning commission, their planning commission, approved it unanimously last week.
Yep.
But we know there's at least one no vote and possibly a second no vote on the planning commission board, and we're worried that
The full board.
On the township board.
Township board. Yep.
Township board, I'm sorry.
There's lots of steps. You might not know this. A project's got to go planning commission, board, and then they go to the county. I see a county
And then they go
commissioner.
back.
County
And
planning,
then they go back
county
again.
board, yeah, and
Lots of steps.
and we had to bring in the school board on this project
Yes.
because we needed easements for their land. It's been very, very complicated.
Which the
to
school
work
is
all this.
extremely supportive of. Everybody should know that. For anyone who's familiar that thinks, well, that butts right up to the school's property. The school is very supportive because guess what? Teachers, real close to
I
the
love
schools.
it. And students.
And students. So as
sidewalks.
you said, tonight.
Yeah, so that's tonight at 7 o'clock. Like I said, there's some nervousness that this may not, those two no votes could pull some others onto the negative side, and we really need to keep this as a positive. This is 156 units that could come to our community. So if anybody's compelled tonight, we're going to be there,
Join
a few
us.
of us. And so, join us at 7 o'clock for another fun public meeting. You know all about those. So Heidi, you had a question?
With all the numbers you were talking about, one area I'm curious about is the summer help that we need. Do you have any sort of number on what number of employees do we need for the seasonal help that we're looking at for like seasonal housing as well?
So seasonal housing is a whole nother hot topic. And that is, it's interesting because, there is hard data being developed. We've been talking about these questions as a group. And you might have a little bit more from the 10 counties, but I know in Emmett County individually, there's been some efforts to kind of start to retain that and see what's next, because we know the seasonal workforce is vital to a tourism economy. So I'll let you take.
I'll just add that Networks Northwest is doing a seasonal workforce study right now. And so we're hoping that will come out and some of the data will be available in our housing summit. And I believe they're also gathering some short-term rental impacts through that study. And we do hope to update our target market analysis that you saw the numbers from today with what we would call more of a housing needs assessment, probably engaging this year into next year as well to get that study for the 10-county region, but would cover each of the counties. And we can choose add-ons through that process. So we'll be coming to Emmett County, trying to find out what you would want added on if we were to do a housing need assessment for your community.
So it's a great point that Yarrow makes, that there are great organizations at the large and the whole trying to do these studies, because those are not easy to retain and develop those numbers. It takes time. So that is a whole separate issue. Short-term rentals, seasonal workforce, we stayed out of that.
But to that point,
Yeah.
outside of the statistics aspect of it, it's important to see the steps that have been taken at the county level and the planning commission to make ADUs, which is additional dwelling units, allowable in many of the districts with restrictions, but that is a really great strategy to allow somebody to have a seasonal rental there, you know, not shorter than 30 days, but that accommodates our seasonality, you know, in our workforce, to have an available unit. It's small, maybe, but practical and safe, and gives them a space to be, and allows us to get some of those individuals kind of throughout the community instead of just in one sort of dormitory style. You know, that's no fun anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of fun, but
Not maybe the kind of, well, maybe we could attract more workers that way. But it's, yeah, that's a
but
big
that's
thing
it's
the
one
county does.
strategy, and again, like
Huge.
it's a huge part of our economy, and we're trying to accommodate all these housing needs.
Yeah, and
It's there.
yeah, and we're also seeing employers, I kind of touched on this, employers literally buying houses.
Yes.
Stafford Hospitality has done this in order to put their people up. You know, they're that desperate for people. And Ben, I don't know, not to put you on the spot, but you're kind of the poster child of having experiences of employees losing homes and all of that. Can I put you on the spot for that comment? And we'll use the mic, folks, because we're being live streamed.
Yes, that's why we're asking you to just wait, or else we won't be heard. So
I take it you just want me to give the quick explanation what happened? 2 minutes or less. So we lost, I own Beard's Brewery in Petoskey. We try to be a good year-round employer with solid pay, solid benefits. If you're full-time with me year-round, you are full-time regardless of how lean the winters are. And we lost 4 great employees between September and November because all 4 of them had their leases end. One, his house had been purchased a couple years prior by a seasonal resident who intended to turn this duplex apartment into a single retirement home, so that's somebody moving up to the area in a retirement capacity, so they're not adding to the workforce, but they're taking away 2 homes that were occupied by workforce. So he had to move to Wisconsin because he couldn't find another house in the area. And then the other 3, 2 of them were lifelong residents born and raised in Petoskey. The third had moved up here for work. All of their landlords decided to convert the homes to short-term rentals. So they said that they would sign them for a new lease it was between May and June, but they would only go through that term because they knew they could make 3 or 4 times a monthly rent on a weekend in July. So all 3 of them, including 2 people born and raised in Petoskey, one's now living in New York State, one's now living in Montana, and then the third one who had moved up here for work is now back down to Detroit. So, it's problematic when somebody who's born in this area can't live here.
And it's interesting because Carlin mentioned, we know employers that are buying houses for their short-term employees and for their long-term employees. And there's a lot of conversations that Andrea and I have had to that effect.
Yeah, and as an employer, large and small, that can be a powerful way to participate at the front end of a development project. Something like a commitment to a 3-year lease that the developer can then put into that. They can use as equity, basically. So even if it's 1 unit or 2 units, if you're a bigger organization and you'd like to do a whole floor of units, that's something that can come in at the front end of development as well as be taken advantage of at the other end, which helps to give the employer a little bit of control over what they're charging based on what they're paying their employees. So it's kind of like an in-house subsidy, which is nice.
Yeah. And then, you talk about time, treasure, talent. Another treasure that you contribute is if you're making X number of dollars doing a VRBO or an Airbnb, perhaps you go back and turn that into a year-round rental. You're giving up some money, you're sacrificing, maybe making a loss, but you're helping one family sustain their livelihood here in Petoskey. So just something to think about. We had another question here.
I'm really impressed with the work you ladies are accomplishing and the projects you have on I guess, in progress. I got a question about, I just discovered a development called Conway Commons. Are you people involved with that in any way? Or?
I mean, the partnership advocated for it. I know Housing North was aware of it. Anybody want to speak on Conway Commons?
No, they've been charging forward. I am not in close sort of conversation with them. They've been charging forward, but I think I've run into somewhat of a hiccup. So they're on my list to address as far as what barrier are they hitting, because I see that there are units there and there's something stopping it. So that is right in my sort of, in my lane of an opportunity to say, hey, what can I do? What will it take? What are we up against? And who do I need to contact to, you know, take that next step forward for you guys? Because that's a huge,
That's a big one.
it's a big one. And that's, yes.
Yes. And
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Manufactured.
Yeah.
There's a big, wow, I think you can speak to this a lot too when we talk about what we think of when we think of manufactured housing is manufactured housing from the old, but what's the modular that you are seeing now, which a lot of that manufactured mimics. I mean, it's a different beast. These are awesome. The Habitat homes, as Tahara said, with the it's unbelievable, those houses are.
Well, yeah, there's some, I'm going to
Lean into
closely
me.
into your mic.
That was awkward.
Yeah, there's
so thank you.
There's some different language used about housing, and so I was sharing modular, and if you saw the pictures, I mean, they're a home, they're a house.
Yes.
They're a stick-built home. They just happen to be built within a facility where they're put together, just like you would on a site. I kind of argue that it's better because you're not getting rained on while you're putting it together, and it's not you're not having it exposed to elements. But yeah, it's just like a site-built house. Like I mentioned, they're super high quality and energy efficient. So,
Quiet.
what?
They're so quiet. That's what I
Oh, they
noticed.
are
I'm like,
quiet.
they're so quiet. Yes.
Well, yeah, we beef up the insulation and things like that
They're
to
beautiful.
make them as efficient as we can.
Yeah, one of the main problems brought up is just like the cost of acquiring land and building. I would think that some ways to like lower the cost would be like higher density, removing some requirements for just like make sure that like buildings are more dense, easier like just like cost per foot. Are there any like local or state initiatives that are being done in terms of like planning or zoning law to make housing more affordable in that way?
Who wants that one?
I think we could all talk about
We
that
could
one
all
a little
talk
bit.
about- You've got the microphone, go.
I got the mic, so I get to talk first, I guess. So I'll speak to that just briefly, and I'll let my colleagues up here add. But one of the biggest challenges is the infrastructure. Because we are rural, there's not municipal water and sewer to a lot of our areas. So, and that's really crucial in building higher density projects. So that's probably one of the biggest barriers. The cost to add those systems is just astronomical. But I'll pass the mic.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I want to say about that is I think that's where when we're talking about looking at our master plans and looking at our development, because we are a rural community or more rural community where the tradition has been to have a very large lot with spread out around your neighbors, and so there are areas where that absolutely makes sense and where we don't want to change that community feel. And then there are areas where higher density development makes more sense. So like the Lofts at Lumber Square project is a perfect example where a denser project makes sense. It's already zoned that way. There were no variances or anything that needed to happen for that project to have 60 units there. It is what is zoned for. And so we have to look at development in that way too. And so there have been some changes at the county level. The county reduced their minimum dwelling size, for example. So they reduced the square footage that a house has to be to allow for those kind of smaller units. They also, I think, just made some changes allowing for duplexes
Yes.
in residential zoned areas.
And
So
as
that's
Andrea's
another
huge.
improvement for density in that regard. So a lot that could be done, but I think the biggest barrier to that is the infrastructure.
Absolutely. Anyone else down here want to
I think
comment to that?
attitudes have changed on this since we first started this work. There was a story, and it's a true story, and I won't label the township, but we had a developer bought 7 acres and and the zoning was 1 unit per acre, and they penciled it out. If they could do duplexes, so it would be technically 7 structures, but 14 units, the project penciled out and they could make a feasible project. And the township wouldn't give. No, it's 1 unit per acre. I think if we went back to that township today with what we've learned or what we've taught and educated and all that, I think they would be more flexible. And obviously, I keep looking at you, Ron, but the county's been doing a lot of good things in that respect in terms of looking at where density is appropriate and where we can do it. So it's a great question.
But it's also still an argument. Just in a meeting within the last month, and there was comments about density. And, well, I don't know if we want that. That large of a unit could bring crime to the area. And, you know, I would rather see those homes spread out. Well, if you have density or if you have sprawl, which do you want? Do you want the density, one, to, you know, as it fits into each community? Packing 100+ units, if you're not going to do it in 9 or 10 acres, how big are you going to go and where are you going to go? And now we're back to infrastructure again. So while, yes, attitudes are better, it is still an issue for people. There is still the thought, if they had to one of their meetings, that you're going to build how many units where, that's crime. It's an instantaneous response. And it's a knee-jerk response. It's an education response, too.
Traffic is also a
Parking,
density
lights.
thing, but I always use the example of we've all driven on Cemetery Road, the road you would take maybe to go out to the casino that way. There's Vantage View subdivision there. There's Maple Village Apartments. There is, I don't know, 3 or 4 city neighborhoods that feed out onto Cemetery. I've never had a traffic issue on Cemetery Road. You know, housing is not a real dramatic impact on
Everybody
traffic.
doesn't leave their house all at once, contrary to popular belief.
So first, a statement to that. I live in Parkview Estates, and it's a community, you know, just across from East Park. Each of us has approximately a half an acre.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any crime happening up there. Traffic is great. The community is amazing, and it actually builds community to have places like that. It's a positive thing.
Yes.
But for clarification purposes, the Conway Commons, the original of that is a mobile home park.
Correct.
So you're saying there's an addition to that now. I'm a realtor in the area, so.
Do you need a still manufactured, but not the
Okay.
up level?
So-
Because
so
there's
in
three,
realtor
those 3
speak-
words confuse people.
Right.
Mobile home, manufacturing,
No,
modular.
Well, in realtor speak, it's steel frame HUD versus Boca
Right.
modular. And you're saying the new ones are Boca modulars.
Not
They're
at Conway,
not
not at Conway
Boca.
Commons. No,
Not at Conway Commons.
that's
They're,
a manufactured.
they're a
That
manufactured
is
still.
manufactured. So your
Yep.
new ones, though, that you are bringing in with Habitat for Humanity are going to be Boca or stick built. So just as a statement, for lending purposes in the future, those homes don't have a ceiling, whereas
Right.
a steel frame HUD being brought in, you know, the value is perceived differently.
Mhm.
So I just think that's a positive thing. You're finding something affordable that is also being, quote, considered a real housing solution.
So I would like to speak to the manufactured housing units in general terms, because like we said, they're not what they used to be. And also, we're up against, as a community, a very hard build barrier. We don't have enough builders. If I had $100 million in my pocket and a willing developer, I might not be able to get anything built. So something like a manufactured home that's already ready, it's built to code, it's safe, it's functional, and it's perfect for something like maybe an additional dwelling unit if you have enough space and you would like another stream of income, or a multi-generational family, you know, setup that helps you address your childcare needs or your transportation needs by you know, putting multi generations of your family together.
Without everybody in the basement.
Without exactly,
Yes.
you know, a little compound. I don't know, little Kennedy-esque
compound
maybe,
Who
but
cares?
trailers. I just want to get past. I really, there's still a stigma, and it's hard for people. But I think it's a safe, quick solution versus having to go through the process of even a modular build. You have delays sometimes. You have, you know,
Cost.
it's a heavy lift time-wise. And this is something that can happen really quickly, and that matters for people, and it matters in the seasonal workforce. It matters to this summer. So
Well, I think it's like we said too, we need all kinds of housing at different price points, and so that offers, I think I'm loud enough.
You're good.
Okay.
We want to make sure that picks you
Yeah.
up.
So just having a wide variety of housing options, I think is what is really important.
Yeah, that's, you hit it, and you both made a great point, is there's so many different types of housing that are needed and all have impact. And I think that's, one of the crucial things to take away is whether it's the subdivision or whatever Yara wants to say.
Well, I guess I was just going to say from Housing North's perspective too, while we do have a seasonal need, we also have an issue where people are displaced or have to leave in the winter, or often the sites are not year-round housing, but people end up living in them year-round. So I think we do want to encourage year-round building that could also be useful for seasonal workers, if that makes sense. Because we could have our tourism be, some people might just want to come here in the winter too if we get more snow, or other reasons that people, but what we're finding is people are displaced, because of our seasonal economy, or because the house isn't available, to be lived in year-round. So anytime we can build safe year-round housing, we really encourage that.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, Yarrow, I think the work of the chamber and some of our other economic development work has been to elongate our seasonality, right? to move away from this, we have a 3-month economic boom. And so to that point, as we're more successful in that, and we even 7 years ago when my family moved here, my husband grew up here, but we moved back to this area, the shoulder season was very quiet, very quiet. It's not quiet anymore in May and September, October. So we're seeing that spread out, and I live over by the ski hills, and it's very busy in the winter. So that seasonality is starting to change a little bit.
Absolutely it is.
too.
And what's also changing is our economic makeup is changing. Granted, we are always going to be tourism community, resort-based, if you will. But, as the economy diversifies and as our economic development arms look at this, there is manufacturing increasing in the area, and there is increase in tech, and there is innovation happening, and there is a change cycle, if you will. So it bodes to the point that it's not always those 3 months, and that's all it is for our year-round residents. There's a lot more to that. You have another
And I wanted
question,
one more
Carly.
thing that I just wanted to add on to the gentleman back there that was talking about density. And I want to also just think about, I know I mentioned the lofts at Lumber Square and how it's a 60-unit development, but there are a lot of different ways to do density. And if we look at our communities now, we have shining examples of multifamily housing within our neighborhoods that
Wouldn't even
look
know it.
just like the single-family homes next to them. And that in the industry is referred to as missing middle housing, and we absolutely need that in our community.
Huge.
So when we talk about duplexes or fourplexes, it doesn't have to be this scary idea, because it's already in our communities. You walk around, and there are
You
a
just
number
don't
of
know it.
examples in Petoskey, a number of examples in Harbor Springs, where what was once a single-family home has been turned into 2 or 3 or 4 4 units, and they fit in with the neighborhood, and it allows for that density, and parking isn't an issue, and all of those things. So I don't want us to just think about density as a big apartment complex, but density in terms of infill
Yep.
on those.
Huge.
And that's really where the opportunity lies, because we don't have those big parcels of land that have the infrastructure available to do those big
Great
apartment complexes. We have small infill lots where maybe we could put 3 or 4 units instead of 1, but there's connected to the infrastructure. So
And
just
there's
wanted to
been
make
zoning
that point.
changes on that too, like
Yeah.
you said, and that's huge, not just on county, and that's moving in cities and townships too. But again, back to advocacy, because it's not all the way through in some of them. So being cognizant of time, we have an arm wave. Well, that's a wave if I've ever seen one in the back.
So anybody else besides Ken want to talk? Mr. Winter.
Very much, but I find it, most of you probably don't know, but Ed Fry Sr., who started the Fry Foundation, made a lot of his money on Foremost Insurance, which provided the first insurance for mobile homes in Michigan. And so here we are back. He's founded foundation is funding housing. My question is, what's happening on the other front for finding employment for livable wages?
We're a housing committee, Ken. We're letting other people solve that
Okay, so
problem.
you had the choice of putting me up here, and what topic do we want to talk about? We chose housing. So that's a whole different, it's all part of the conversation, and since we're running out of time, you don't want me to get going. But livable workforce, we know that that's part of the whole housing picture. And it's to Sarah's point so well that and everybody said it, we need all types of housing. and to Ben's, losing employees and what that's like. There's a lot to be done, but it's all kinds of things, because truthfully, and we've all touched on this, it isn't just housing, it's also transportation, especially in a county like Emmett County that is so rural. It's also childcare, which is massive. I don't think I run into, that's the other phone call we get as a chamber from employers is, yeah, my 3 employees just lost their daycare and now they're not coming to work. And so do you have one? Do you have a daycare we can call? Same place I have the house that you asked for last month. So there is that livable workforce. I'm not gonna lie, it's a scary thing. It's all of us together being very cognizant of all the issues that are affecting that livable workforce, so.
And then there's also demand, well, as I'm making my way back to Tom, but we're looking at potential climate migration, right? People moving to this area for climate relief, as that phenomenon occurs. And then we're also, we saw a lot of transition happen during COVID as people say, hey, I can work from anywhere. I'm going to work from Petoskey or Harbor Springs or wherever that might be. So, Mr. Adams, what do you have?
Thank you. I notice housing is an expense issue, right? And we're always trying to find a way to lower costs to make it more affordable, right? And there's a common theme in all the projects, or most of them, is those individual substantial donors, right? These projects are not getting off the ground because everybody in this room donated $100. It's because somebody took it upon themselves and made a contribution, whether it was through the community foundation or whatever it may be. This may be totally off topic, but one of the things that we're considering in our business that doesn't normally get brought up, and what made me think of it is this livable wage. The idea of the employers have to pay more.
Right.
And I'm going to suggest that what we're finding in my business is the lack of skill sets to manage the money they make is the biggest obstacle to affordable anything. And if there was a way within our community to address that, and we're exploring ways to do that, but I think somebody making 120% of the medium wage, whatever that number is, if they had the skill sets to better manage the funds that they had, affordable becomes, opportunity exists. So that doesn't apply to the housing topic, but it does impact this, and we're always looking at how do we raise the wage, employers, and how do we lower the cost of housing, when I'm thinking we're missing an opportunity to focus on the individual's ability to do that. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. I'll say that Habitat does provide housing counseling. In order to qualify to purchase a home, you have to complete an education series that does a deep dive into budgeting, becoming a first-time home buyer, things of that nature. So, and that service is available to anyone through Habitat for Humanity, whether you end up deciding to purchase a home from us or not. I know a lot of the area banks, like Huntington Bank, offers those services free of charge to the community. So definitely, those services are available out there.
The chamber has some members too that, hi, you want to give me that? I'll take it anyway. Yeah, it has some too to that point that are doing that, and it's actually something that we're looking at too. And it brings up a whole nother topic, but we're wrapping up, and that's, hey, next conversation is the ALICE population, because while you can educate and you can help, there's also the fact that there is the asset limited income constrained employed, meaning that you know how to manage, you know what you're doing, you took all the classes, you're doing great, but the transmission went and the boiler went, and now what? And so there's so many pieces to this, and I just appreciate everybody coming today, because we took of our Hot Topics program, thank you Comfort Keepers, and thank you DTE, to our wonderful sponsors. We took one teeny tiny bite today in this little event to show one piece of our fabulous community, and all these wonderful speakers sitting up here today, and all of you in the audience. It does take a village, for lack of a better term, but it does. So we appreciate you here today. The Chamber appreciates it. This is one of many. Obviously, we'll take off the summer, touching on, as Tom said, educational topics, transportation, childcare. We know all these matter, and we know they all work together, but we can't tackle them all in one 90-minute meeting. So we appreciate it. Remind you once again, please take some information, educate yourself more, sign up for newsletters. Feel free to reach out to the chamber or anybody up here on the panel for deeper discussions. We really want to be a part of the solution, and we know that we need you to do it. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Carlin for helping. Thank you again, Russ and DTE. Thank you.